Okay, Mikkel Gudsø here, and I'm together with Kateryna Koval from Ukraine. And Kateryna, you know that 99% of the world is behind Ukraine in this full-scale war against your country and your people. So before we start this interview, could you just briefly give us a short biography of who and what you are?
Hello, Mikkel. Nice to meet you. My name is Kateryna Koval. I'm from Kiev, Ukraine, and I am a politician, reserve officer, professional diplomat, and political technologist from Ukraine.
Okay, thank you very much, and great to have you here. So where are you now? Are you directly in Kiev?
Yes, I'm in Kiev.
Okay, and what is the situation right now? Because we heard that at least the official troops of Russia, they left Kiev, but I also heard that there has been some missiles or bombing. So what can you tell us about the situation right now?
Yes, the situation in Kiev now is more calm as it was, and officially Russian troops have left the territory of Kiev region, but it's not calm for 100% because, for example, we're still having bombings from the air by air missiles in frames of Kiev. So the situation is difficult for now, and authorities are telling to the citizens of Ukraine not to go to Kiev because it is too early to go to Kiev further.
Okay, so we also heard, at least in the beginning of the war, that there were apparently parachute troops or small groups of special forces that were trying to get to your president, Mr. Zelensky. Are you still fearing that although the troops has left officially Kiev, that there are small groups of infiltrators, so to speak?
Of course, official troops are left from Kiev region, but we should understand that we have groups of diversionists still in Kiev and in other cities of Ukraine. And it's not the situation for these 2 months, a situation for I can say more than 10 years and more than 20 years, because there has been times when we were one country with Russian Federation, and we know that Russia's policy is the policy of the empire. And of course, here we have observed spies and groups of diversionists. So, of course, it's a very painful situation for us, but we should understand that we still could have diversionists in Kiev too.
Okay, and Kateryna, you know that you are a political scientist, or you're working with diplomacy, and I am an expert on negotiation, also mediation. So, of course, the peace negotiation has been quite on my radar for some time. And we know that there's been several meetings of peace negotiations between both the track of Ukrainian delegation and the Russian delegation, and then also on the Minister of Foreign Affairs level. But talking about the peace negotiations, can you call a bit light or cast a bit of light onto what were the positions of Ukraine initially, and what were the position of the Russians initially?
Of course, our position is to make peace and to stop killing people, because according to the military science, the first is to save people, second is to save military technique, and then to save territories. Of course, we were talking about making, for example, neutral status of Ukraine and stopping our way to the NATO, because the first thing is to save people. And from the side of Ukraine, we can see that really we would like to make peace and save people. But when Russian Federation started talking about recognizing of non-recognized republic, Donetsk People's Republic and Luhansk People's Republic, so it's illegal since because it's our territory, is the territory of Ukraine. So, and we have war for more than 8 years, and 8 years ago, Russia has invaded Ukraine. So, and thousands of our people died, and thousands of our militaries are died. So, if we recognize these republics, we recognize that our people just died to have this independence of the states, and to recognize that Russia has threatened Ukraine, but it's illegal because it's our territories. And concerning the Crimea, of course, Russia Federation annexed Crimea, and it's our territory. So in such a way, now we have misunderstanding in frames of these peace negotiations.
So as I have heard from those peace negotiation meetings, apart from the difficulties in the positions that each of the countries have, I also heard or read some rumors that there were a person on the Ukrainian side that eventually Ukraine found out was also communicating with the Russian delegation behind the negotiation, and as such, he was a spy. And apparently he was killed by the Ukrainian security services. Is that something you know anything about?
Yes, it's an official information about killing the spy by Ukrainian state service of security, and of course, as I've said, in Ukraine for many years, we can observe the groups of diversionists. So during this full-scale war, we can observe more and more diversionists. So it is such a situation.
You're watching Big Deals by Honorary Associate Professor Mikkel Gudso.
So a couple of days ago, Mr. Zelensky said that one of the things that made it difficult to continue the peace negotiations as time has gone by is that in Ukraine, because of this war and because of all of the killings of civilians and killings of soldiers, of course, also, there's a growing hatred in Ukrainian people towards Russia. So according to Zelensky, this makes it very difficult to have peace negotiations with someone who is occupying your country or trying to take over your country and killing your people. On the other side, Mr. Lavrov from Russia, he says that Ukrainian delegation is difficult to negotiate with because they keep changing their positions. What are your comments to both the remarks of Zelensky that it's difficult to negotiate with the devil and the comments of Mr. Lavrov that Ukraine keeps changing positions so that you cannot negotiate with Ukraine?
I can say that Russian Federation continues to make manipulations and propaganda in information sector, and the statements of Mr. Lavrov as the examples of this, of course, because our position is stable to make peace and stop killing our people, and both civilians and militaries. And of course, from our side, from Ukrainian side, it's very difficult to make negotiations because Russia has invaded Ukraine 8 years ago, and many people lost their homes, many people lost their relatives, close people, and thousands of militaries have died. Of course, it's very painful, but many people remember those times when we have been the one I think one great family and one country with Russian Federation, not the part of Russia, but the part of the USSR. And many people, for example, were serving in the army together or educating together, having worked together. And many people from Ukraine and from Russia were communicating for many and many years. And now when we hear, for example, from information poll, from people whom we're working with about it's okay to kill Ukrainian Nazi and please demilitarize Ukraine and to make more bombings. It's really painful for us to hear. Of course, we are on our own territory and it's okay to defend our own territory. And of course, for saving lives of people, we should make this negotiation.
So what I heard from Russia initially was that one of the demands, or they had many demands, one of them were for Ukraine to recognize Luhansk and Donetsk as sovereign territories and sovereign states, and that Ukraine should accept Crimea as being a part of Russia, and that you should demilitarize, you should not go towards NATO membership, and you should not go towards the European Union membership, and that they also wanted to denazify Ukraine, as well as making Russia officially a second language of Ukraine. Now, there's been a lot of talks about the whole denazification, and of course, Russia, they used to fight the Nazis under the Second World War. In many countries, we see small groups of very nationalistic people, and some of them may qualify as neo-Nazis. We see that in many countries. But do you know why Russia is making the claim that Ukraine and the leadership of Ukraine is Nazified?
I think that it's a great story for many Russians. We understand that it's a very poor country and many people have lots of their own problems. For example, problems with earning money, with work, with education, and they have no time to investigate what are the reasons and what is the real situation in Ukraine. And of course, if we go to the history about the Russian Empire, for example, of course, Empire invaded many countries and many territories which are now in Russian Federation were invaded many times ago. And of course, we have many stories about the countries which Russian Federation invaded, that the situation there was very bad, and this nation wanted Russian Federation to help them. Of course, it's a great story for the information front, for the manipulations and for the Russian propaganda. So about Ukraine, we know we have our own historical heroes. For example, Bandera. He is a nationalist and a great patriot of Ukraine. And of course, to make it creative, this story, they drew some stories about Ukraine and Nazi. I think so.
Okay. So I think from what I have researched that some of the stories that they are using is that, of course, Ukraine has a very strong army, and that is not the story that is being told in Russia. But one of the divisions in Ukraine, the Azov battalion, they have been, if we look on articles on the internet, some of those soldiers in that battalion has been associated with pro-Nazi point of views. Would you say that the Nazi or neo-Nazis is representative of Ukraine or the Ukrainian army, or are there no such thing?
Of course, we have no Nazi in Ukraine. Of course, our troops would have their own symbolic, and so we have such traditions in other countries too. So it's not about Nazi. Nazi, it's the creation of Russian propaganda.
So now we have these peace negotiations, and we don't know where it's going to end, because each side is saying that the negotiations are very difficult for various reasons. Some of the things we know from peace negotiations in general is that what can often be a problem is that if, for instance, the Ukrainian army is winning on the battlefield, as it seems it has done for the most part, then maybe the positions of Ukraine in the negotiations become more Ukrainian positive. And if the Russians are having success on the battlefield, they start to feel more comfortable in rising the positions in the negotiations. So do you think that the peace negotiations will only pick up in speed when one of the sides are about to almost lose the war?
Yes, I think that when Russia see constantly that Russia is very weak in fields, they will go to peace negotiations faster. And for now, we can say that Russian army is not professional, isn't so professional as Ukrainian. They are not so good trained. Their command is not so great as our, and so they have no success in fields. So shame on this army, of course. And if we see some information from the pieces of news, we can see that some young soldiers, 18 years old, they don't want to be mobilized because they understand that they would be killed. And these young people would not like to be killed. So it's the real situation. Of course, they don't show this news in Russia, but in modern world we can see this news. Our resources are not banned, and of course we understand that the situation is. Of course, first, Russia Federation should understand and should realize that their army is very weak.
So do you have any information if it's right or wrong that Facebook and Instagram has been shut down in Russia, and also that some Google results are not possible to see in Russia? What can you tell us about the information situation in Russia, if you know anything about it?
Yes, I know about the situation. I know that is true because people wrote to me directly, and they told me that they have no information. If they, for example, use VPN to use Instagram, so it loads very slow. And in Google, for example, most of results about Ukraine are really banned, and so they don't understand who are telling the truth because they have no information. So do a pity.
You're watching Big Deals by Honorary Associate Professor Mikhail Gudso.
So right now, Russia, when they took the Crimea, it took them a very short amount of time to do so. It was almost like a blitzkrieg or blitz war. It went very fast. Now they tried again to maybe take over the entire Ukraine, and so far they have not succeeded. Now it seems that they are focusing primarily on the Donbass and the southern region. Do you believe they are trying to build a land bridge from Russia to Transnistrian in Moldova, or what do you think is their military strategy right now, based on what we can see on satellites and on the warfare?
I think that concerning building this bridge is unreal because their army is weak and they have no ways and no methods to do it right now. Of course, very important for us and I think for the whole world because it is about the global security. This fight on the east of Ukraine, fight for Donbass, and of course, I believe that our army is too strong, and of course, we will win in field. We understand that Russia, they would like to have not only the territories of unrecognized republics, and also the territories of the whole regions, the region of Donetsk region and the region of Luhansk region, the whole region with the whole cities, towns, and villages. To repeat that, but they cannot do this because our army is there and it's very strong.
So it used to be, as you said, from historic points of view, that because Ukraine and Russia was a part of the USSR, there are a lot of people speaking both languages. There are a lot of people, that used to be almost like brothers and sisters. But it seems now that because of this war, or maybe even since the Crimea situation, that the relationship between the Russian people, not just the government, but the Russian people and the Ukrainian people has been put under an extreme amount of stress. When this war ends, in order to create stability in the relationship between the countries and in the entire region, do you think or see any future in which Ukrainians and Russians can be friends again? Will that happen in your lifetime?
I think that, for example, from my side, I will never treat Russians or Belarusians as our friends, as our sisters and brothers, because I'm telling everybody that me, from my troops, from infantry, we had a brother, his name was Dima, and he was killed by a Russian tank. And that's why I will never treat Russians and Belarusians as our brothers and sisters. And of course, most of people don't understand why so many Russians and Belarusians are happy about killing Ukrainians and are happy about raping Ukrainians, Ukrainian women. It's a really crazy situation, and after this, most of Ukrainians cannot treat Russians and Belarusians as brothers, sisters, and friends. Maybe in thousands of years and hundreds of years it could be, but not earlier, because we understand that it's not about just about friendship. It's about some morally qualities, and we know if Russians say about killing and raping, so they have no this moral. So maybe it can be in many years, far from this year, far from today. And of course, I believe that we should have the final of this war. Making the peace agreement, because living in a modern world, we should understand that diplomacy should be on the first place. And but firstly, we will show Russians that they are zero in field. So after this, I believe that we will have the peace agreement.
The reason I'm asking also, Kateryna, is because I know some Russians and they don't like the war. They think the war is unreasonable and it is terrible. However, as you know, if you even call it a war, you can go to jail. If you protest, you'll be sent to jail. And they cannot do anything. And many of them are trying to get out of Russia, for instance, or they cannot do much. So maybe the situation is that a lot of the educated Russians, they are not pro in terms of the war, and then there are a lot of people who may be victims of propaganda. But if this war ends, could we do anything to build a bridge between the countries like they did in Africa after some of the genocides and some of the civil wars? They have had some reconciliation, mediation procedures in order to get different sides that have fought against each other to live amongst each other after the war. Do you think that there could be such a process between the people if, for instance, there came a new regime or a new leadership in Russia? Do you believe that a reconciliation process between the people of Russia and the people of Ukraine could help speed up the situation in not becoming brothers and sisters, but respecting each other?
Very controversial question, I can say, but I think that in the nearest future, it's not so realistic because less of Russians really respect Ukrainians. Of course, we should understand that not all of Russians would like Ukrainians to be killed, of course. But most of them to a pity, and they're victims of this propaganda. So, of course, we should understand. So maybe further, Russia Federation will have some movements of freedom and some new movements, and so there will be new patriots of Russia who are very morally and could be respectful to Ukrainians, and of course. But if to say about big scales, I think that no, because we Ukrainians, we can't treat most of Russians like people whom we can respect anymore. So I can say no.
Yeah, it is definitely a tough situation and a very hard situation given all the losses of civilians and the many cities that have been completely destroyed. So just the cost of rebuilding the buildings, just the time it will take to rebuild the roads and the cities, well, we're talking billions and billions and billions of dollars and many years before we see the cities coming back to a good state of condition. So we have this Arm Ukraine situation where a lot of countries are supporting Ukraine with weapons and with training and various equipment. And of course, that is helping the Ukrainian army to progress in the war. Could the world do other things? Because I'm a mediator myself. Could we try to support the peace process by forming a group of mediators instead of these very simplistic attempts with the French president doing something on his own, the Turkish president doing something on his own, and the Pope saying something here and there? Could the international society perhaps try to put together a group of mediators and see if that could help the peace process? What do you think about that idea?
Thank you for this idea. Of course, we are very grateful to other countries for supporting Ukraine, for arming Ukraine. Of course, I'm as a professional diplomat, I understand that the last word should be after diplomacy, but as we see from our experience, Russia does not respect diplomacy at all. So these negotiations is the great example. So all the questions is to Russia, why are they playing? Why do they not respect diplomacy, and why are they playing for the 8 years in such a game? Where are Russian troops? We don't see them. So it's really unrespectful for the whole world to make in such propaganda and to make in such games and manipulations. Of course, I believe in diplomacy, but we see that Putin does not believe and does not respect diplomacy to a pity.
You're watching Big Deals by Honorary Associate Professor Mikkel Gudso.
So the reason I'm also talking about this idea is because I think that if we should reach a peace agreement, I think there are no longer just two parties, Ukraine and Russia, because due to all the sanctions that has been imposed on Russia, and there are probably many more sanctions to come, I believe Russia, if they were to sign a peace agreement, would like to see some or all of these sanctions relieved. And I also think that Ukraine wants some security guarantees from other parties. So I believe that in order to reach a peace agreement, we probably need more parties to sign such an agreement anyways. And that's where my idea of the international mediation initiative could come into play. But let me hear, just as wrapping up this conversation, Kateryna, what is your personal situation? You're a reserve officer. What is your potential role in this war from a military point of view?
Of course, I'm a reserve officer from the infantry, and from the start of this war, I was taking part in international sector, for example, supporting Ukraine-NATO and making analytics and interviews with international media. And then we will see. I would like to be more productive on this war, so I'm finishing my little treatment, and then we will see where will I be.
Okay, so there is a potential that you will maybe not go to the front, but you will be placed somewhere into dealing with the war on a more practical basis, or what do you see potentially happening within the next couple of weeks in terms of your work?
So for now, I have variants about how to be more productive. So of course, one of the variants could be to go to the front, and other variants are to make more practical things concerning my professional fundament. So I'll see where can I be more productive.
Okay. But from here, first of all, thank you very much for taking your time. We will be following the peace negotiations very closely as they hopefully evolve. I hope that the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian army will win, and or that a peace agreement will be signed as soon as possible, although it does not seem to be a part of the horizon. Just one last question. Do you fear that as Ukrainian army is continuing to make progress on the battlefield, that Russia could go into using strategic nuclear weapons? We have heard about this in the news. Mr. Lavrov has just said yesterday that he has been misquoted, and that Russia is doing anything they can to prevent a nuclear war or the use of nuclear weapons. But is that something you fear as a potential reality, or do you think it's just empty threats?
I can say that Russian Federation is threatening the whole world with their nuclear power. And of course, we should not exclude any variant of scenarios from Russian Federation, and we should be prepared for every scenario. So, of course, as we see from 8 years of war, we could not believe Russian Federation. And for now, we have bombings of Kiev from the air. We have bombings of other cities. And of course, we can say, for example, they have no, for example, infantry operation if they can shoot people without technique by tanks. So it's not fair war, and of course we should be prepared for everywhere.
Okay, yeah. So thank you very much, Kateryna. Kateryna Koval, political scientist, diplomat, reserve officer, and just a human being trying to survive in Ukraine and fighting for your people with your skills on media and Arm Ukraine, and maybe even potentially in the front. Just from here, I wish you all the best. Good luck to you, your country, your military, and hopefully we'll have peace sooner than later. And I hope we can stay in touch later on, and hopefully you have better news when we speak in a month or two. So thank you very much for your time, Kateryna. It's stupid to say be safe, but nevertheless, I hope you can be as safe as possible, and the same to your country.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, stay in touch.
Yes,
Bye-bye.
stay in touch.